Buck, I think that's over. I think that's done, but
What do you mean?
I think his career is finished.
That line from 50 Cent hit different because not long after, young Buck was drowning in bankruptcy papers, IRS pressure, and jail time from probation slips that stacked up one after another. His whole career didn't fall overnight. It crumbled piece by piece, and the truth behind that fall cuts way deeper than most fans ever realized. That silence around him said more than any headline ever could. From the streets to stardom, his journey wasn't some glossy rise, it was pressure from day one. Let's run it from the top because Buck's come up is wild enough to shape everything that followed. Growing up in Nashville, Tennessee, young David Brown wasn't moving through comfort, he was moving through survival. He bounced from CF Wright in North Nashville to South Nashville's J.C. Napier projects, then into the South 7th projects. By the time he hit 8 years old, he already knew the city from every angle, weaving through hoods where the air felt heavy and choices came fast. This wasn't just childhood. It was an education built on grit. To stack a little cash and keep the house afloat, Buck hustled in every clean way he could think of. Pumping gas, cutting lawns, washing cars, anything to put a couple dollars in his pocket and keep the lights on. Music became the one place he could breathe, the space where everything made sense. He freestyled with his day ones, battled whoever stepped up, and carved out a name in Nashville's underground long before anyone outside the city knew him. That early fire in his voice wasn't an act. It came from living every line he spit. Now here's where things shift. The moment that exposes just how hungry Buck was for something bigger. Buck and his homie came across a BG Chopper City CD, and on the back was a phone number for Cash Money Records. Two kids with nothing but ambition dialed that number with a wild plan, pretending they wanted to book Cash Money for a Nashville show. Somehow, against all logic, the call landed, and the booking actually went through. The show itself never happened, but the move changed everything for Buck. Sometimes one reckless shot becomes the doorway to a whole new life, and that was the moment his road truly opened.
But what did happen was Buck and Lil Jimmy ended up meeting everybody at Cash Money Records, and the first thing that Birdman told Buck was to spit a freestyle for him, and he put him up against Lil Wayne at that time, and they went back and forth, and that ended up impressing Birdman.
Birdman was so taken by Buck's raw presence that he brought him straight to New Orleans, ready to see if this young voice could really sign with Cash Money Records. The air in those studios hit heavy, like Buck had stepped into a world he'd been chasing his whole life. One move and everything could shift. At just 14 years old, Buck made a decision most grown men would hesitate to touch. He left school completely to chase rap full-time. No hesitation, no safety net, just hunger pushing him forward. That wasn't a gamble, it was survival dressed as ambition. Music wasn't a pastime for him, it was breath, escape, and the only door out the hood. That truth sat on his shoulders every day, reminding him what he was really fighting for.
Buck ended up coming on with them and hopefully having his situation figured out as well. But as years went on, Buck said he spent 3 to 4 years with Cash Money and none of his music ever got released. He got essentially put on the back burner while the other artists on Cash Money like Lil Wayne, Juvenile, BG, so on and so forth, ended up blowing up.
The only real proof Buck has from his whole Cash Money era is that quick appearance in the Big Timers Big Ballin' video. A blink and you miss it stamp from years of waiting around. By 1999, he'd had enough. He watched everyone around him rise while he stayed parked on the sidelines, and eventually he made the hard call to leave Cash Money and head back to Nashville to carve his own path. That frustration hit him deep, like the city itself was telling him it was time to move. But those years weren't wasted, not even close. Buck picked up real game about the business and built crucial ties, including DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia and Juvenile, connections that would matter way more later than he ever expected. Back in Nashville, he linked up with his local crew and got straight to work, fully independent. No label machine, just grind, grit, and long nights that felt heavier than the beats he recorded. No backing meant no shortcuts, just pure hustle. On August 22nd, 2000, he dropped Thuggin' Till the End with his homie D-Tay, and something wild happened. The project actually charted on Billboard, hitting number 34 on the US R&B chart and number 17 on the US Independent chart. For a totally independent Nashville rapper, those numbers were a signal. The streets were listening. That truth hit him like a pulse. Buck moved about $10,000 worth of units, which might sound small next to major label machines, but doing it out the trunk made it real. It proved he wasn't chasing a fantasy. The audience was there, and they felt what he was saying. That success whispered something sharp in his ear. This could be the way out. Then came the wake-up call that flipped his whole direction. The moment that forced him to pick a lane once and for all.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion and a robbery. One in the arm and one in the upper thigh area. It was enough for me to wake up and really realize that, yo, if this shit keep going on like this, I'm either to get killed or I'm gonna go to jail. And I really realized that because I was getting down for real. Really started to devote more of my time to the music then, the studio, period.
After recovering from getting hit during a home invasion robbery, Buck made a promise to himself that hit deeper than any lyric. No more street life. Full focus on the music grind, nothing else. That moment forced him to face the truth. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was transformation. The air around him felt different after that choice. And right when he needed a lifeline, one came from the past. His old Cash Money connection, DJ Paul from 3-6 Mafia, someone who always respected Buck's talent and pen, heard about the shooting and reached out immediately. Project Pat drove up, scooped Buck out of Nashville, and brought him to Memphis to lay down some tracks. Those sessions carried a quiet intensity, like everyone in the room knew something big was shifting. Out of that grind came Buck's first major placement, Memphis on 3-6 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears 6661. That was the look he'd been waiting for, the kind of exposure that could flip a local hustle into a real career. But even with that opportunity, Buck didn't end up signing with 3-6 Mafia. Instead, he returned to Nashville, pushing independently again, only now he had visibility, respect, and connections that could actually move mountains. That realization hit him like a cold truth. His path was finally opening. But hold up. Before we jump ahead, we gotta talk about how Buck ended up with G-Unit, because that story is wild. Things started heating up again when Birdman, his old Cash Money link, reached out with a new proposition. Cash Money wasn't the same operation Buck walked away from years before. The place had exploded. Bigger offices, polished luxury cars, the whole image upgraded. Birdman wanted Buck to join a new group he was forming called Head Buses. Buck flew back to New Orleans, hoping this time would be different. But history began repeating itself in the worst way. He waited around for a week with no paperwork, no movement, nothing but promises, and Buck wasn't that naive 14-year-old anymore. He had bills, responsibilities, and momentum back home. Sitting around in limbo wasn't an option. That frustration showed him he needed more than words. Then something unexpected happened, something that shifted his whole future. Juvenile walked into the Cash Money offices, stunned to see Buck still waiting. He was dealing with his own issues with the label, his own storm, and right then, he made Buck an offer that would flip the entire story upside down.
Juvie happened to pull up at the office, and when he pulled up, he was kind of shocked to see me there. I'm like, I've been here for a whole week. And he was like, man, you want to get up out of here for a minute? You know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie, and that's where my career started, with Juvenile.
Buck officially stepped into Juvenile's UTP camp, moving with the squad even if the paperwork never fully caught up. But here's the part that shows Buck's real street sense. Juvenile handed him a contract, and instead of rushing to sign like most young artists would, Buck took it home, slid it under his bed, and never put his name on it. That was a quiet, sharp move, the kind that comes from watching the game long enough to know when something doesn't feel steady. That hesitation told its own story. He dropped 2 projects during that run, Born to be a Thug on October 10, 2002, and a compilation with the UTP Players on October 8, 2002. But on paper, he wasn't tied down to anything. Why? Because Buck was paying attention. He'd already seen how chaotic things could get at Cash Money, and he noticed Juvenile dealing with his own heavy problems with the label, real personal disputes that made the whole foundation feel shaky. The lesson hit him hard. Loyalty doesn't mean locking yourself into sinking ground. At one point, Juvenile even told Buck straight up that if something better came along, he should take it. That advice stuck. While on tour, their bus stopped in New York, and it just happened to be 2002, the year 50 Cent was the hottest name in the entire city. The streets were buzzing like they knew history was shifting. That tension in the air was real. The tour bus driver had a connection to 50's former manager, Shaw Money XL. And Buck kept pushing him, trying to get 50 onto the bus so they could cook something up. And it actually happened. 50 stepped on the bus, but he came to work with Juvenile, not Buck. That moment could have been a wall, but Buck turned it into a doorway. He used that time wisely. While 50 and Juvenile worked in the back, Buck played his solo joints for Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo up front. One track grabbed Banks immediately. Banks took the beat to the back, showed it to 50, and that song eventually became Bloodhound on the legendary Get Rich or Die Trying album. That was Buck's first real handshake with the mainstream, the one that cut through the noise. It wasn't actually the first record they all touched together. That was A Little Bit of Everything on the 50 Cent Is the Future mixtape. But Bloodhound was the one that introduced Buck to the world. 50 liked Buck but couldn't offer a deal yet since he wasn't signed to a major label either. Still, he didn't forget him. So when things at UTP fell apart exactly how Buck predicted, fate slid back into the picture and lined their paths up once again.
A week after the deal fizzled out with UTP, 50 Cent ended up calling Young Buck and said, "Hey, we want that Bloodhound track. We'll pay you $20,000 for it. Let us put it on the album." And the track is getting mixed by Eminem and Dr. Dre.
50 wanted to fly Buck out to Los Angeles to meet with him, Eminem, and Dr. Dre, the kind of room artists spend their whole lives trying to get into. For someone who'd already taken so many losses, this felt like the moment everything was finally lining up. Buck's first real placement under the G-Unit umbrella was Bloodhound on 50's Get Rich or Die Trying. But 50 was smart about the rollout. Instead of rushing Buck into a solo lane, he decided to drop the G-Unit group album Beg for Mercy first, introducing Buck as part of the machine. That strategy carried weight. Beg for Mercy peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200, moving 377,000 first week and eventually hitting over 2.7 million in US sales. Young Buck wasn't just stepping into the spotlight, he was being launched onto one of the biggest platforms hip-hop had ever seen. The whole hood felt that moment like a shift in the air. Following the G-Unit formula, Buck dropped his mixtape Welcome to the Hood on May 31st, 2004 with DJ Who Kid, building the buzz toward his solo debut. Then on July 2nd, 2004, he released the first single Let Me In featuring 50 Cent, which hit number 34 on the Hot 100. That set the stage for the next move. Then came the big one, August 24th, 2004, when Buck released Straight Outta Cashville. The album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200, selling 361,000 copies first week and eventually going platinum. Shorty Wanna Ride hit number 17 on the Hot 100, becoming his highest charting solo record. But the impact went further than sales. Buck broke what people called the Nashville curse, becoming the first major non-country artist from the city to truly crack the mainstream. For Nashville, that was history. But the highs didn't last. On November 15th, 2004 at the Vibe Awards, things spun out fast. Dre, Eminem, 50, G-Unit, and Suge Knight were all in the building when Jimmy Johnson allegedly put hands on Dr. Dre. Young Buck allegedly reacted and stabbed Johnson, sparking chaos. Buck went on the run for a couple days before turning himself in. After a long wait, he received 3 years probation and community service. It ended lightly on paper, but it was the first real sign that his instincts, the same ones that kept him alive, could also pull him off course. That tension hung over everything that followed. In 2005, Buck stayed active. He jumped on 3-6 Mafia's massive hit Stay Fly, which hit number 13 and went double platinum. He dropped an independent project to help push G-Unit South, the division 50 had put in his hands. Buck wasn't just an artist anymore. He was stepping toward becoming an executive, carving out his own corner inside the empire. That responsibility came with weight. By 2006, Buck flooded the streets with mixtapes and dropped Case Dismissed with DJ Drama on February 6th, celebrating both the end of his legal trouble and the rise of G-Unit South. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. As Buck worked on Buck the World, 50 Cent and manager Shaw Money XL started having serious beef. 50 brought the whole crew together and told them straight he was cutting ties with Shaw, and they all needed new management. This is where Buck's loyalty turned into a risk. He and Shaw Money were extremely close enough that Buck was the best man at Shaw's wedding. So when 50 told everyone to drop Shaw, Banks and Yayo followed orders. But Buck didn't. That choice would echo louder than he ever expected. And
Shaw Money had became a best friend of mine. I'm the best man on this man's wedding. That's how close Shaw was. Me and Shaw were probably closer than me and 50. Him and 50 was, so I'm the best man of this man's wedding. I'm judging Shaw not from a business standpoint of his problems with 50, but looking at him as my brother.
Buck saw Shaw Money as family, not just management. In his mind, there was no reason to cut a man off who hadn't crossed him. He believed whatever issues existed would eventually get fixed, so turning his back on Shaw didn't feel right. But 50 took that choice as straight disloyalty, like Buck was siding against him. That tension hit instantly, heavy and cold. Almost overnight, you'd see Banks, Yayo, and 50 together at shows, while Buck and Shaw were left promoting Buck's project alone. Buck always believed this played a major role in why Buck the World didn't match his debut success. The album dropped on March 27, 2007, debuted at number 3 with 140,000 first-week sales and went gold. Solid numbers, but not the impact he expected. The singles I Know You Want Me and Get Buck didn't hit the way his earlier records did, and that weighed on him. At the same time, 50 started accusing Buck of being cool with his enemies, The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, even though Buck says he was only passing information back to 50. But to 50, even that contact felt like betrayal. Things kept snowballing. 50 also claimed Buck was reckless with money, ignored taxes, and that he'd already covered Buck's taxes twice. By 2008, Buck learned he owed the IRS $300,000. That became a major storm he couldn't outrun. Early 2008 got worse. In January, Buck hit a show with Lil Wayne and Birdman where both publicly said Buck should leave G-Unit for Young Money/Cash Money, and Buck seemed to agree on stage. When 50 saw the footage, he was furious. Then in February, G-Unit dropped the return of the Body Snatchers Volume 1 mixtape, and Buck wasn't on it. Fans were confused since they'd just done Feel Good together. The cracks were widening fast. Then came the moment everything fell apart. In March 2008, 50 and Buck had a private phone call, except 50 secretly recorded the whole thing. After the call, things briefly smoothed over. Buck even appeared on G-Unit's Elephant in the Sand mixtape. For a minute, it looked like the storm might break, but that peace didn't last at all. On March 20th, an old Yo Rap's interview dropped where Buck said, "I'm still waiting on a royalty check. I've never seen one since I signed with G-Unit." He said the only real money he'd ever seen was show money. The problem? That interview was old, recorded months before, but the outlet dropped it right as he and 50 were repairing things. The timing felt like sabotage, and it hit hard. Shaw Money tried to clean it up the next day, saying Buck had made over $10 million under 50's leadership, but the damage was already done. Then on April 7, 2008, a Monday morning, 50 called into Hot 97 and officially announced that Young Buck was no longer part of G-Unit as a group, though he would remain signed as a solo artist under G-Unit Records. The split was public, loud, and impossible to walk back. The following week, when the whole G-Unit crew hit Hot 97, 50 aired out more details and even claimed Buck had a drug problem. Buck stayed silent for a bit, probably trying to wrap his head around everything falling apart so fast. But on May 12, 2008, he dropped my interview addressing both the split and the allegations. That track carried the weight of a man trying to steady himself while the world watched. Things stayed quiet until June. Then Buck made the move that locked his fate. On June 15th, during a live show, he publicly dissed G-Unit. That was the point of no return, the moment that drew the line clear as day. 2 days later, June 17th, 50 released the full-taped phone call where Buck was crying and asking for help. The timing was brutal, the impact even worse. By June 18th, Buck fired back with a diss track called The Taped Conversation, and The Game even jumped on the remix. There were rumors of a joint Buck Game mixtape titled Worth More Than 50 Cent, but it never came to life. The streets were watching the fallout unfold in real time, and the tension was thick. When G-Unit released Terminate On Sight on July 1st, 2008, Buck was only featured on 4 tracks, basically a guest on what should have been his Cruise album. That separation didn't just feel real, it felt permanent. For the rest of 2008, Buck barely released new music because, according to him, 50 was blocking anything official. Since he was still signed to G-Unit Records, he couldn't drop an album without approval. That chokehold forced him to pivot. Starting in 2009, he hit the streets with mixtapes instead, and real fans noticed something. That era might have been Buck at his rawest. The desperation, the hunger, the pressure in his voice made the music hit harder than ever. He sounded like a man fighting for oxygen. Back for the Streets dropped April 11th, then Back on My Buck on May 26th, both filled with energy that felt like survival. Tracks like I Want It All and I Got It with Young Jeezy showed him pushing forward even with the world closing in around him. But while the mixtapes kept him visible, everything around him was collapsing. Legal trouble and old debt started crashing at once. On August 3rd, 2010, the IRS raided Buck's home over more than $300,000 in unpaid taxes. During the raid, they found a gun. And since Buck was a convicted felon from the 2004 Vibe Awards case, They charged him immediately, even though he insisted it belonged to his licensed tour manager. The situation felt stacked against him from every angle, heavy and unavoidable. 3 days later, he dropped my campaign, addressing the raid directly, proof that even when life hit him hardest, he could turn pain into music faster than anyone expected. That resilience was the one thing he could still control, even as everything else spun out. Then on August 19, 2010, Buck filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy. But here's the key detail people overlook. That filing allowed him to finally break free from his G-Unit Records contract. It was a desperate move, but a strategic one too, giving him the first real chance to move independently in years. Not many artists could have pulled that off under so much pressure. He dropped his indie album, The Rehab, on September 7, 2010. It debuted at number 55 on the Billboard 200, selling a little over 6,400 first week. Solid for an independent release, though far from his peak. Still, it showed he was fighting to stay visible. But the legal problems wouldn't let up. In March 2011, G-Unit Records filed a $10 million lawsuit against him. Then out of nowhere, a small spark of hope popped up. Late that year, 50 Cent tweeted, "Ma, for some reason I think Young Buck is mad at me. Who cares, I'm giving my $250,000 back, sucker." It was messy, but it hinted the door wasn't completely shut. Things got darker in 2012. On March 4th, Buck survived a drive-by shooting outside a Nashville club. His girl was hit in the shoulder and the whole moment felt like life closing in again. Then on July 13th, Buck was sentenced to 18 months in prison for the weapons charge tied to the IRS raid. The hits kept coming. A month later, the IRS auctioned off Buck's possessions, jewelry, studio gear, everything. They collected $53,000, but the real blow was the public humiliation. It showed how far he'd fallen. Buck turned himself in that August to begin his 18-month sentence, another heavy chapter he had to carry. On October 2nd, 2013, he walked out of prison, and what happened next shocked the entire hip-hop world. Behind the scenes, 50 Cent had been rebuilding relationships with Yayo and Banks, and apparently Buck was still on his mind. On June 1st, 2014, at Hot 97 Summer Jam, 50 brought out all 3 original G-Unit members. The crowd exploded. The reunion was real. They followed up with 2 EPs, The Beauty of Independence on August 25th, 2014, and The Beast is G-Unit on March 3rd, 2015. Both had strong records, and fans thought the family was finally back in sync. Buck then launched his ambitious 10 mixtape series, 10 Bullets, 10 Bricks, 10 Pints, 10 Bodies, and more between 2015 and 2018, proving his work ethic was still unmatched. But even with all that momentum, more legal trouble and new setbacks were waiting around the corner. On July 15, 2016, Buck was arrested for threatening to burn down his ex-girlfriend's apartment and ended up serving 7 months in the Bing. Then in 2018, it looked like the tides might turn again. He dropped Can't Lose on March 30th, a track packed with energy that deserved way more shine. Around that time, he even announced his 3rd studio album would be executive produced by both 50 Cent and Dr. Dre, which had fans believing a major comeback was loading. But just when things seemed steady, the relationship with 50 fell apart again. 50 claimed Buck owed him over $300,000 and hit him with cease and desist, blocking any release he attempted. That pressure was impossible to ignore. In 2019, leaked audio of Buck speaking with a trans person went viral, and 50 mocked him relentlessly online, shutting down any remaining hope for a G-Unit reunion. By 2020, Buck filed for bankruptcy again, aiming to escape the contract and dodge 50's lawsuit. After a long legal fight, Buck lost in 2023 and agreed to pay $200,690 of the alleged $250,000 debt. To cover it, he liquidated assets worth roughly $1.05 million, burned through $445,000 in legal fees, and left only about $600,000 for creditors. It was another heavy chapter he had to face head-on. Then in April 2025, he was arrested again and sentenced to 30 days for repeated violations of his bond supervision tied to his 2020 domestic assault case. He was released around May 12, 2025, and his trial is now set for January 12, 2026. But despite everything, Buck seems mentally and emotionally stronger. He's active online, celebrating milestones like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Cashville, reconnecting with fans and focusing on building what's left of his legacy instead of drowning in old battles. That shift says a lot about where his spirit really is. If you stayed locked in till the end, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe because it helps more than you think. And check out one of the videos on your screen to keep the story going.